Agency Board and this session, this joint work session of the EDA Board and the Destination Medical Center Corporation Board. We're so pleased that so many people take their time to come together, make this the highest priority for their time. I'd like to particularly thank our government officials who are here today, part of this entire process, not just today's meeting, because we count on you to be the voice of the people who've elected you to office, and that's a tremendous honor and responsibility. I'm also very pleased and grateful for the participation of our community volunteers, people who are giving their time for this project, people from this community and from beyond, and who believe so much in what we're trying to do here. So thank you all. Today we have a series of presentations that will be interactive. This is a work session, not just a slideshow, and this will be a tremendous opportunity for us to engage with the planning consultants, to have a discussion as we move forward to developing the final concepts of the plan. We're here to provide them with direction, feedback, inspiration, and we will do it. We're not a quiet, shy, retiring bunch. Once we've had the discussion today, the planners, under the direction of the EDA management, will go back, incorporate it, and come forward with a final plan to propose for approval December 17th by the DMCC board and the City of Rochester. I've asked Lisa Clark, the Executive Director of the Economic Development Agency, to please facilitate today's discussion, organize the work session. And so we're going to, I believe, Lisa, I don't know quite the order of events, but we're going to hear about the best practice trips, and I think that might be a really nice way to kick things off. So please, Lisa Clark, you take over and facilitate. Yes, please. Yes, of course, Madam Chair.
My mouth full of
Yeah, I waited until you got your mouth full.
I know, thank you very much.
Chair Smith, would you like to say a word?
Thank you. That's right. I should have timed that a little bit better, but I'm really hungry. So, well, I just wanted to add my thanks to everybody for being here today. It's great to see all of you. You are looking pretty bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, though I know you're working really, really hard. So thanks for that. And I wanted to just say that I'm really looking forward today, personally, I'm really looking forward today to having a good conversation about kind of what the economic development strategy is here and how that strategy is going to advance the job creation and also tax growth goals that we have. And so I know that this is complex and there are many, many different pieces of it, but I'm just looking forward to that part of the discussion as we think about what our priorities are going to be, where are we going to get the biggest bang for our buck in terms of jobs and tax-based growth.
Thank you very much, Chair Smith. I think that was a really very helpful framing comment. Appreciate that. My colleague from the EDA board wanted to make sure that the EDA board publicly, again, congratulates you on your election, as well as Councilman Ruska and Mayor Brady. We did so at your meeting, but we have a new audience here, and we want them to hear our delight in this as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. will also extend my sincere thank you for being here, and we have a great few hours ahead of us in our windowless room. We're going to keep you alert and on track, but I first thought it would be really interesting for us to look at a snapshot of Rochester. So we are all here. We're talking about Rochester every single day. We're talking about the people from Rochester. We're getting input from the people from Rochester and, frankly, the state of Minnesota. And wouldn't it be nice if we could tell that story? So we've asked our team to really put together a series of videos that we're just kicking off next week on the story of Rochester. Almost every single day, I get a call from somebody that asks about the Rochester story, where it's been, where it is today, and where it's going to go. And so I enjoy having those conversations every day because it's really such an exciting time for this wonderful city. So there's a few things about this video, and again, this is the first video, and we'll be kicking off a series starting next week. It's about three things. It's about having a strong foundation, in which we have here in Rochester. It's about the people, and the people have come out in full force to really talk about the DMC plan and what it means to him or her and what it means to this community, which every day I welcome. And three is about momentum, because we've started the momentum, we've gathered momentum, we continue with this sense of momentum with DMC, and again, thanks to the people in this room and to this community. The video that you'll see now is really about connecting this plan, what we've been talking about for the last couple of years, to our community. So it's just a couple minutes, and I'm going to turn it over to our colleagues to get it started.
News every hour on the hour throughout the day at 97.5 KNXR in Rochester. And welcome if you're just dropping by. We always have lots of good listening in store for you.
It was such a big year for Rochester, thanks in a large part to the passing of Destination Medical Center.
Feel like we're ready to go? Where else would you rather be? The whole community's out for this one. You can really feel the excitement in the air. Because everybody here knows the time is right now.
So that's us. That's us, and it's only going to get better from there. So you'll start to see a series of these moving forward so that we can start to tell the Rochester story. The next version of this will be really about who these people are in Rochester and what they mean to this community and how they connect to the DMC effort. So we're connecting the people to the plan, and I think that will be really a powerful story for us to tell today and into the future. And I'll thank Jamie Rothy and her video colleagues for moving forward on this video project. So thank you. All right, we're going to get into the real meat of the program now. But first, true to my nature, I would like to ground everybody a little bit on a few things. First, I want to talk about the discussion outline. It will change, and it will morph, and it will ebb and flow, as we always do in these sessions, and that's actually what it's about. So we're going to first talk about our best practice trips, and we're going to go into some of the visioning, and so people can see some of the updates on the master plan. We've got a whole transportation plan overview, which was discussed quite a bit this morning, infrastructure plans, development district discussion. We, of course, need to talk about some of the funding models, the economic, the fiscal, and then the plan overview again. And what we're hoping for today is truly interactive discussion, questions. We can push and pull and tug a little bit all day. So, there's a couple of things we want to do the grounding in terms of our, well, I guess we're not. In terms of what Tina was talking about, that this is a true economic development initiative, and it's something that we want to keep grounded in those values and those objectives and goals that we approved very early in the year, actually, and perhaps it was last year, in terms of what this plan is and where we're going to go. So we want to make sure that we stay grounded in those economic development initiatives or goals and objectives. We will keep those in front of you throughout the next few hours so that we don't get too far off track in terms of what this is really all about and what this means. So we talked a little bit about the best practice trips. Earlier in the day, at our DMCC board meeting, Chair Smith did a really nice job of getting some input from the people around the table who were on these trips. And these trips were fabulous. And people ask us about the journey and where we went and what we learned about and what our key takeaways were. And I do want to hear from all of you in terms of what that might mean to you. But these were the 5 cities that we visited, and each city brought some little jewel to our trip and to our discussion. And we learned so much about everything from transportation to working together to thinking grand to creating a strong workforce. So each of these cities really taught us a little something in terms of what we can take away and what we can learn. I thought I would just run through some of our key takeaways, but again, because it's a new meeting, I'm really hoping that some of you might be able to add a couple of thoughts that you have about what your journey was with these particular meetings. We talked a lot about investing in transportation, and I might call on Mr. Beer to really comment on that because he's been somewhat verbal. I know it'll surprise you all about transportation. Mr. Beer?
Thank you, Lisa. Well, my takeaway from the trips out in Seattle, again, like you say, Lisa, I'm a big transportation person, and transportation is where it all starts. You have to have transit. We met a developer out there. He indicated that he would not do a development project unless it was located within a block and a half of a transit hub, or not the hub, but the actual line. If we want to get people downtown, both patients and employees and people living downtown and have a vibrant downtown, I'm convinced that we need to have a good transit option down there, whether it's a streetcar, more buses, walkability, bikes. I think we've got to have the whole gamut, but transportation is key, and I think that's where we've got to start the focus.
Thank you. Any other comments on transportation from anybody?
Thank you. When we were in Indianapolis, I remember several, I think it was Simon, executives that spoke to us at the University Circle, and he said, I wish we had transportation because we built without transportation, now we can't bring it in. So, just to echo your comment.
Sort of the lessons learned.
The Portland had their light rail from the airport to downtown for 30 years, and when we were in Seattle, it was like about 7, and they said we wished we'd have started much sooner, that same thing. And also, the ease of getting on it, I mean, whether it's wheelchairs or motorized carts, when I was on it, I rode from the airport in, got me about a block and a half away from the hotel we were going to. And I said it earlier, what I liked was the gentleman was helping me as I was going to get a ticket to get on. He said, well, you're one of our honored citizens. And I thought, well, how do you know that? but it was.
I am indeed.
Yes, of course. Oh, did I have my name badge on? But anyway, it was, they don't call it senior citizen, which I am, but it's honored citizen, and so it was only $1 for me to go from there all the way downtown, and it took about maybe 40 minutes, 45 minutes, stopping along the way, and you kind of can see what the city looks like just coming in. But it was very positive that way. There was a picture earlier that showed that one circular pond that was right outside of our hotel, and I just happened to, when I looked at that, I thought, oh yeah, that had the fellow on a unicycle. He had a bagpipe, but I don't think it was playing any music because every once in a while fire would come out of the pipes of his bagpipe. So it was pretty unique, right at that picture out in the top left there. So, but anyway, yes, the transit is extremely important. The other thing was that it was a little takeaway that I don't even remember which city, having streetcars in the area through the neighborhoods, the neighbors really kind of connect with a streetcar more so than with a bus. And they said a bus, they all feel that it's kind of intrudes on the neighborhood, but somehow they have an affinity to the streetcars that come in there. So that whole idea of circulators, getting around town, making it easier that way, you don't need to have cars all around all the time. And so I think one of the lessons is we've got to take a good look at that right up front on our transit.
Right. Well, the conversations we all had on these different transit systems really is a testament to how it weaves into the community, because we talked with so many different people from the community who got on and off these different transit systems, and actually we learned a lot from the community members. So, Mayor, to your point, or honored citizen, to your point, it does become a part of the fabric of the community. The next 3 bullets, thinking big, being intentional, or collaboration, thinking big, being intentional. Ed Ruska and I talked a lot about that while we were on the trip, and I thought maybe you might want to comment a bit about that.
Sure. I think when we saw the leadership from both the cities, I went to Cleveland and Indianapolis. In Cleveland, it was the Cleveland Foundation. In Indianapolis, it was the Lilly Corporation that kind of drove both of their visions and outcomes. But the biggest thing was everybody was involved in some aspect of buying into the plan and helping the plan to become a reality. A couple of the things that we saw in Cleveland that really stood out to me, their Downtown Alliance was very plugged into the redevelopment of their downtown. They'd taken approximately, they kind of repurposed a bunch of the old buildings in the downtown to 1,100 kind of apartments and housing units. A lot of that was done from the new market tax credits, in leveraging that, and then some local investment money from their foundation and so on. But they also put $200 million to revitalize kind of their streetscaping, which was federal money. So as you start to kind of see what other cities have done and leveraging other monies there, you start to see how the financial plan starts to fall together. And yet without the plan, these things wouldn't happen. So. And I think the Cleveland Foundation was a big player in this. $4.3 billion in holdings, and half that money was undesignated. So they went to an old neighborhood and they started new businesses right in that old neighborhood to try to get people to buy local, live local, and work local, and kind of revitalize that whole area with an investment that created products that would bring in revenue, that would get people working, and so on. So everything kind of works together with the plan, and it took time. They did say with the fact that you've got the Cleveland Foundation and Lilly Corporation driving them, they said it can't be government. Government, elected officials, they're too impatient. They want to see results now and not in 20 years. It needs to be a long-range vision that needs to be, the community needs to understand, work together, and complement each other to be successful. So, that's kind of some of the main things that I took out. I don't want to speak too much. Is there anything else you want me to hit on, or is that kind of what you're looking for? Yeah. It was really, I think the other thing, too, I'll just quick touch on Cleveland was, I really didn't think, when I heard somebody said, well, have fun in Cleveland, I kind of chuckled. I'm like, really? I remember Cleveland as, on 60 Minutes, seeing old houses bulldozed and seeing, remember when I was younger, the lake being on fire, so they have completely, I was really amazed by the quality of life that they've created in that city through doing this and through, it created a city that you kind of wanted to be part of. And so I was really impressed by going out and seeing the Cleveland Clinic and how far out it was through a bunch of neighborhoods. We had to take a bus ride 10 minutes away to get away from the downtown to get to the Cleveland Clinic. It had a different feel to it than the Mayo Clinic in the downtown Rochester. So I think that gives us our opportunity to look at what we have in our downtown. Cleveland's doing a lot of good things, and they really are. They're stepping up, but I think we've got a really great scenario here set in front of us to be able to do a lot of great things too.
Great, thanks, Doug. Thanks, Ed. Another thing that came up loud and clear, and I know we're all talking about workforce development and creating the workforce of the future. The live-work environment came up time and time again, almost in every single city, about the new talent that we're trying to attract. They do want to live closer to a downtown center, and they do want to live and work and play, frankly, in the same environment. And we learned that at every single stop, people talking about attracting the talent, looking for new talent, and that's what these people are looking for. So I think our plan is spot on right now in terms of trying to create more density in the downtown area and attracting this talent, which will be critical to the success of DMC and, frankly, the success of Rochester. One thing I thought perhaps Dr. Simmons might want to comment on, part of our plan is Discovery Square, where we is about innovation and connecting research and education and science and bioscience and technology all in one space. And we learned a lot about that on our trips, and I thought perhaps Dr. Simmons might want to comment on that and how it connects to our effort.
Well, thank you. I will, but I'm going to frame what I say by first saying I found the most valuable part of this trip processing the information together with the people who were able to take the time away and study things together, and it helped me see what I was seeing because of the value our colleagues brought. I'm going to answer your question a little more complexly than you intended, but one of the key messages to me was the critical importance of the integration of the livable community, making it attractive to come, to stay, to work, to visit, and the economic development of investing in the very industry that we must. Frankly, unless we have a vision that integrates those two, neither one can succeed on its own, because the quality of the life depends on the economy. The economy depends on being able to attract and retain companies and the workforce. So that really is key to me. As we looked at places that had invested in attracting industry, there are a few specific lessons that we ought to take away and apply, in my opinion. One is that we've got to have a broad approach, that we've got to consider not just trying to get a lot of new startup companies to come, but get established, big, successful companies to want to have some component of their operation here. It takes a long time to grow startups, and a lot of them don't survive infancy. So you really don't want your eggs all in one basket. A second thing is you've got to capitalize on what you've got. And we've got such a large research investment in the health sciences in Rochester that we need to make sure we figure out how to leverage that well to grow the peripheral and the associated industry. And finally, it takes not only buildings, but it takes policy, and it takes commitment, and it takes making sure that the parties have common objectives and common principles to guide realizing the potential that's here.
The last bullet on this list is the importance of champions and partnerships. And the champions, of course, are sitting around this table and in this room, in this entire room, because people that are interested and people that are commenting and people that are weighing in, those are the champions of this massive project. So again, I want to say thank you for that. We have some of our planning colleagues here as well, and I've invited Bill, and you can probably just do it from there, Bill, if you want, to make a few comments on the best practices. Bill Anderson is with AECOM and has done a lot of work across the nation on this front as well.
Well, thank you. There were these common themes, and I think these embody many of those common themes in the different cities. Their contexts, of course, were all very different in how they approached it. Portland was interesting because they started with place as an important value. And that when we talked to their economic development folks, that was the first thing they talked about, was place and the importance of it, which is not what we often hear when we're talking with economic development folks. And so they say it's a long tradition there because of the environment they're in, why people came to Portland, why people have chosen to stay in Portland and live there. And they had talked about the link to their general plan, their growth plan for the region for 40 years, trying to direct growth towards the core and protecting resource and agricultural land in the area so they don't sprawl into it. The other thing that was interesting there was the importance of transit, which was mentioned, and that was very important. And they had data to show where the real estate investment is focused, and as you mentioned, it's along the corridors. But also the importance of flexibility in space, which was a lesson learned for them in designing and planning for space to be flexible to evolve over time, where space might be research and development, might be light manufacturing, might be services, might be housing, might be retail, all in the same building because the space is flexible enough to accommodate those changes over time, and that gave them a lot of strength in their markets in that location and value. And now to the point where, you know, they have the major companies of Nike and Intel and the health systems there. As there was a foundation, and they were originally a port city, a trade city. People now are coming there to start businesses. The national talent, young people are moving there, to young entrepreneurs. And the city had a very interesting program where they used some funds to provide an equity fund to invest in small entrepreneurs, and that's leveraged other venture fund from Silicon Valley to those companies to set up a new incubator of small businesses in the tech sector. Seattle, it was South Lake Union, and that was next to Seattle, and the trolley link was an important connector for them. And their business community formed a business improvement district to help fund that trolley connection, to make that connection to the core of Seattle. And they had the land there and some major investors and land ownership where now Amazon has moved there. But they also have Gates Foundation next door, the University of Washington Research Center, Cancer Research Center. So they originally started to be a biotech, biomed area, but it's evolved into more of a general combination biotech, biomed with technology companies because of lifestyle and startups and housing, and again, mixing it up. And then the other that I attended was Bellevue, which was a very different model. And that was a model of a town that was a suburban bedroom community to Seattle, very low scale development, that in the last 20 years has evolved into a major employment center for that region and created a downtown basically in about 15, 20 years. But demonstrated in their region where companies like Expedia has decided to headquarter there. Microsoft is expanding there instead of on their campus because they want to attract the talent and are competing for the talent nationally and globally, and the talent wants to be in a more urban environment. And then they connect Bellevue to Seattle through a new bus rapid transit system that's making that connection. So, you know, maybe from a character urban design perspective, it's not the model, but in terms of transitioning a suburban location into an urban economic powerhouse in a short amount of time, in a 20-year period, in a city of 110,000 people, by the way, was an interesting model.
Any other comments on the best practices? Dr. Simmons?
Just one, after listening to everyone and looking at what we're looking at, we ought to recognize the competition that's out there. And that was said earlier, but we shouldn't underestimate the fact that others are investing to try to achieve what we're trying to achieve. It takes more than just private funding and public funding. It takes an integrated effort and common vision. So we're not isolated. We're in a competitive pool right now.
That's exactly right.
I just have to add what was funny in almost every meeting in Seattle and Portland, there was somebody in the meeting living there who was presenting to us who was from Minnesota. And when they heard what was happening here, you know, kind of peeked up, oh, this is happening back home, you know, maybe
right.
Maybe I can come back.
Yeah, I'm going to come back and live. So in case you all think we were making this up, we invited the media to attend on these sessions as well, and Tom Overly from KTTC did just that. And he is doing a two-part series on our trips, our best practice trips. So you all might see yourselves in this next clip because I just want you to see yourselves in what you said. And it matches what you said here, just so you know, so it's all good.
Well, Rochester is in the midst of a $6 billion economic development initiative. It is called Destination Medical Center. And leaders in Rochester want to make sure they're moving the DMC plan in the right direction. And one way they're doing that is by looking at what works in other communities with similar designs. Last month, Tom followed them to the West Coast. He joins us in the newsroom with what they discovered. Tom.
Robin, DMC leaders invited KTTC to follow them both to Washington and to Ohio. Devin Bartolotta took the Ohio leg. 5 major cities in 5 days: Portland, Seattle, Bellevue, Indianapolis, Cleveland. The mission? See what works when it comes to development projects in those cities, the good, the bad, the ugly, and how could we incorporate those lessons and development ideas in Rochester in this tale of 2 cities.
I took the Pacific Northwest leg of this trip, meeting DMC leaders and planners after they'd spent a day in Portland. Our first big stop in Seattle, the South Lake Union District. It's an extraordinary neighborhood, one of the few places in Seattle where the entire approach to transportation, sustainability, and recreation has been carefully thought through. And it seems to be a model that works. Business in this district generates an astonishing $3 billion in sales revenue each year.
The scale is different. I mean, Seattle is much larger, but the scale, if you go percentage-wise, what they're doing here, percentage-wise, operates on the same percent.
And it didn't happen overnight. I mean, they grew 100,000 people over a 20-year period. Arguably, that's what we're talking about that might be over the next 20 years or so.
The Seattle area is among the top 5 largest life science clusters in the country, and the industry employs more than 22,000 people. We spent part of the day talking to the Economic Development Council of Seattle to hear how they made that happen. And to get there, we took something we might one day see in Rochester: a streetcar.
Transportation is critical to the success of any downtown urban core development. Developers tell us that, economic developers tell us that, financiers tell us that.
DMC leaders have long discussed rail transit options for Rochester.
You know, we were in Portland and again heard how significant and important the light rail and the streetcars there. Light rail gets you into the city, the streetcar gets you around the city.
And what about a light pavilion that'll span 2nd Street and give visitors a sense of arrival? Or a new bio-business technology district and a waterfront district along Zumbro River with attractions similar perhaps to Seattle's famous Pike Place Market. Across Lake Washington is Seattle's largest suburb, the 3rd stop on the Pacific Northwest tour.
Bellevue is comparable in size to Rochester. They have about 122,000 residents, and they've seen some rapid and successful changes in the past few years.
CNN Money ranked it as the best place to live and the best place to launch a business.
One of the values of this trip is putting together government officials, planners, people engaged in this in the private sector, to learn together, grow together, process together, and imagine how would that look? How would that play out in Rochester?
Hillary Birch is with Perkins Eastman. That's the group helping to shape Rochester's master plan.
So it's getting people to realize that this is not continuing just as Rochester has been doing, but it's going to require a shift, and getting that momentum building is probably the biggest challenge.
Well, back in Seattle's successful Lake District and overlooking the planners' models and pictures upon pictures of building concepts is a simple proverb. It's written in bold print on the office wall: start early, think big, work together, look ahead.
There are some hurdles out there that you know that may come about, and the public is not always going to be on board with it. But hopefully the planners and the visionaries, they come forward with something that we can support.
Being intentional and being courageous, having vision, and persevere. Because these are long-term investments we're talking about.
Tomorrow night at 10 o'clock, Devin Bartolotta shows us what happens when the DMC leaders fly out to the East Coast. And we do have extended interviews with board members of DMCC and EDA who are on this trip. You can go to our website at kttc.com links for more on those extended interviews. And one final note, you do have an opportunity to voice your opinions about this DMC initiative. The 4th forum is tomorrow night at Mayo Civic Center from 6:30 to 9:30. It is free and it is open to you, the public, again, for your input. Robin, back to you.
That sounds good. Yum, yum. Okay, so we're going to get started in terms of looking at the plan right now. I'm going to invite Peter Cavalluzzi, our master planner, to start to walk through the plan with us. And thanks for that discussion. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, so today what we're going to do is, we're going to need the lights. Probably need some music with all the videos and presentations earlier. I feel like I need some background music to help make the presentation today. So what we're going to present today is further development and advancement of the DMC master plan. I don't think you're going to see a lot that's changed in terms of our core principles. We've really focused on creating exceptional places. Places are more inclusive. It's not about projects. It's not about individual buildings. It's about creating buildings as a means to make places for the whole citizenry of Rochester and to create economic development for a wide array of businesses and interests. So that's the theme that you'll see in our presentation today. So we're going to start with a tour through the city, and this is an opening slide that you've seen, I think, at all of our presentations, and we've talked about the clues that are embedded in this aerial photograph of the compact core. Ed talked about how the Cleveland Clinic has their medical center actually outside of the downtown. You have to travel a fair distance to get to it, and once you're there, it's a very suburban kind of environment. So Rochester and the Mayo Clinic have a unique opportunity to create an authentic downtown environment for healthcare and other business. And so that's something that's already started, and we just need to extend and enhance that. We have the river. The river's a great attraction. We need to connect the downtown to the river, and we need to fill up a lot of the empty spaces that you see within the downtown so that it presents opportunity for us. So the overall vision for downtown is, again, to remain a compact downtown area that's walkable, that has a series of great experiences and places that create the address for new businesses, for residents, for visitors and residents alike, and to connect it all in a very walkable and an amenity-rich environment. And again, as Dr. Simmons said, we're in a competition here. That's good. We're in a competition with many cities. They're all competing for the high school students, the 8th graders, the college students that will be the future of Rochester. And so we need to prepare for that, and we need to design the city to accommodate that. And so we need to create a city that is attractive, has lots of amenities, lots of stimulation in terms of cultural and recreational amenities, as well as places to live within the downtown so they can get to these great work environments in a convenient way. So this is how Rochester will transform over the next 20 years. And what you're looking at in this aerial photograph, again, is a $6 billion development. It's not just a fraction of the overall vision. It's the total vision. And one of the things that we've also said that even though that this exhibits the principles of our plan, it will evolve and change over time. It'll respond to real comments and constraints that we develop as we go forward, but the principles will remain true throughout the plan. This is an overhead plan view of the Destination Medical Center plan, and you see, as we have all along focused on about 5 or 6 key places that are distributed throughout the downtown area, totally integrated with one another, connected by transit, connected by a street system, connected by trails, all integrated so that we really get a total economic development of the downtown. The first place that we're going to start with is really the heart of the city, and that's that sort of cluster of buildings that you see in today's aerial photograph, that sort of group group of buildings that really makes up the core of the downtown. And within that, we focused on a specific place, First Avenue and First Street, as a place that we want to create a really catalytic type of development that brings together some of the development opportunities that currently exist and help us get out of the gate and get the momentum building for the plan. As I said a moment ago, one of the unique attributes of downtown Rochester is its compact, walkable dimension. This drawing shows the master plan, and we have that 1,000-foot radius line on there that sort of is a guide that we use to determine what's a comfortable walking distance. And if you look at this plan, you see that the Mayo Clinic, Methodist Hospital, the Convention Center, the waterfront, Discovery Square, historic 3rd Street, it's all connected, very convenient to one another. So visitors and residents can enjoy really all of the amenities that exist within the downtown within a comfortable walking distance. And that's going to be further enhanced with our transit plan that will connect even a wider array of amenities and bring workers and residents to the downtown. We also want to really be inspired by and continue the vision of we use the Plummer Building as sort of the Chrysler Building of the Rochester skyline. The original founders of the city had a very aspirational vision of what the city can be, and we want to continue that aspiration as we go forward in our plan. So just to take you through First is really one of the key places that we're beginning to develop. It's located again at First Street and First Avenue, right in the heart of the city, and right in the middle of Peace Plaza. And Peace Plaza today is really the town square of Rochester, and we want to continue that and build that. It's very proximate to the Gonda Tower, sort of the center of the healthcare facilities, and then also very close to the downtown waterfront. And we're going to show how emphasizing that one location as a way to get things rolling would be a good way to really catalyze all of the plans that we're proposing for the downtown. Right now, First is a very uninspired environment with the glass wall and the block view looking north on First Avenue. Even though it's located right in the heart of the city, there's certainly lots of room for improvement in this location. On the left-hand side of the screen, you see a little wing of the Kaler Hotel, and just on the right-hand side, you see just a little sliver of the theater building, and we want to make sure that we incorporate all of the amenities that currently exist, but improve upon some of the features that really don't contribute to the environment at Peace Plaza. Chateau Theater is a key component to our overall design for First. We want to see that theater be included in our redevelopment plans. Barnes & Noble is leaving. Maybe this can someday come back to a movie house and a performance space that will add to the cultural offerings within the heart of the city. And then we look to the easternmost edge of the shops in the mall, and even though that's a main entrance into a retail development, it sort of blocks off the opportunity to move to the east and move to the waterfront. So we see some opportunities for changes there. When you do an overhead view of Peace Plaza and First, there's a few things that jump out right away in terms of opportunities. These will evolve and change over time, but we've identified a number of sites that we see opportunities for change. The Wells Fargo building, the easternmost edge of the Kaler building, the Marriott Hotel, where all the subway and skyways come together. We need to resolve the multi-level city in this location, and we have an opportunity here at First to do that. And then there's also development on the southeast quadrant, a future redevelopment plan that will emerge, and then also on the easternmost portion of the mall, we want to make that passage through to the waterfront. Just like the best practices trips, we've looked across the world at precedents to be inspired by and learn from and interpret. We're not going to copy what we see elsewhere. We want to learn from and interpret those and tailor them to work exclusively for Rochester. But this is Potsdamer's Platz in Berlin, and it really marks really the center of a district within Berlin that's really the center of the city. And we took some inspiration by creating a very aspirational rooftop that we think might be appropriate in the First location. We often take plans of these developments and overlay them in the specific location, and maybe a little hard to read here, but that blue area you see is located directly over the First intersection. So it sort of talks to what the potential might be in that location, that even though it looks very extravagant and very far-ranging, really in some ways it very much fits within the fabric and scale of Rochester. So we look at that and try to learn from it. We also look at historic precedents in Milan, the Galleria, a great urban space, and how we can create a place that people can be in year-round and be an attraction year-round. So this is the overhead view of our plan for First and First, and you see the intersection. We've identified the four corners as development opportunities with the Marriott Hotel, the Keeler Hotel site, the Chateau Theater, and then the development parcel on the southeast corner, tying those all together with a structure that we're calling the Light Pavilion. And that will be a must-see destination within the downtown, really marking what is already sort of the center of the city, the town square of the city, and really bringing it, emphasizing that and bringing it to, giving it more life. You also see Peace Plaza running east and west on the Gonda building side. We're proposing an ice pavilion, which would be a lower level plaza, much like Rockefeller Center, that would bring much more life and connectedness between the subway system and the street level and create a very lively, warm environment right at the base of the Gonda building. And then on the east side, we have the waterfront passage. Open up the mall, make it more of a welcoming passageway through to the waterfront. If we're ever to get the waterfront to happen, we need to connect it more into the great spaces that we have within the downtown. Just to the south of that, we have a space that we're calling the Portal. That beautiful crescent-shaped space that we've proposed for 2nd Street is focused on the Plummer Building Tower spire. So it's almost as though we're taking a building that was 75 years, 100 years old, and using it as part of a new design that we'll create at 2nd Street to make a front door to Peace Plaza and Mayo Clinic, but also it's a front door to the south for Discovery Square. So it's all totally integrated, really an opportunity to kick off a large part of the plan, but making something that's very visible in the early stages of the plan, so we really set the tone and set the momentum. This is an overhead view. This is looking south. You see the Plummer Tower just on the right-hand top of the screen. You see the beautiful Light Pavilion. We think this will be sort of a must-see attraction. It's connected to the Chateau Theater, so we kind of build on the sort of the theatrical imagery within Peace Plaza and make it something that really creates a town square, connecting the 4 blocks, creating an opportunity to connect the subway level, the skyway level, and bring it more integrated within the heart of the city at First and First. We're also showing new potential development on the southeast quadrant, and so we think we can add development there and make it even more of a center of the city. And again, you see running sort of diagonally through this screen, the passage off to the left, which would be to the waterfront, and then the focal point that we're planning at the Gonda Tower, where we have the ice pavilion and making a real warm gathering space at the base of the building. We also take inspiration from other places. As you know, this is the Lincoln Center balcony outside the theater, and we want to use the Chateau Theater as a way to create a balcony that crosses First Street, a dining balcony to reveal the sort of the celebratory qualities of going to the theater, going to the pre-theater, and have an outdoor space that overlooks Peace Plaza. This is just a rough sketch of what that might look like. This is looking south on First Street, and we have a beautiful dining terrace that now spans where the Wells Fargo building was, so it's much more open, much more revealing of the activity, and also gives you a great panorama of the future of Peace Plaza. We also looked at the Gonda building, and right now, even though the Gonda has a very beautiful, elegant building facade and elegant grounds, it feels sort of closed off to Peace Plaza, and that's why we see such a great opportunity to reveal that as sort of a main street for the subway area and create a, not these dark corridors that you see on the right-hand side of the screen, but create something that's much more open and much more visible, just like Rockefeller Center in New York City. In Rockefeller Center, as we mentioned before, the ice skating rink reveals a whole subterranean passage system that's very similar to what we have here in Rochester, but the connectedness to the street level is what we're after, and we think we can create something that really functions in a similar way. This is a view from the Gonda atrium right above it, right at the top of the stairs where you're looking out across the ice pavilion. You see the Plumber building in the distance. You see all of that activity that's happening currently today. There's a cafeteria there, lots of foot traffic moving through that space, and now that'll all be made visible and part of the life and vitality of this location. And it also creates a very warm and sort of soothing, playful image for people that are visiting the Mayo Clinic that may be under stress, and it gives them something that builds upon sort of the piano, the sort of the relaxing things to look at and hear the noises of the kids out on the ice skating as they come to the Gonda Tower. Probably one of the few healthcare centers that would have such a use and really, I think, make it a must-see and a real notable way of thinking about how healthcare is part of a community. This is an overhead view looking at the ice pavilion. Again, terraces down to the subway system, totally connected to Peace Plaza. So all of that life that's happening underground will now be visible and part of the whole street system. On the east end of the plaza, we have the shopping mall. And while it currently serves a particular need within the downtown, we think we can maximize the value and the utility of this development by making a much greater passage through that space. And we see a beautiful curved arch awning that spans the current opening and making a passage through at street level, but also connecting the upper levels of the shopping mall and making that passage to the gardens, the waterfront district beyond, so that Peace Plaza now just extends to the east and includes the waterfront in its overall design. And you see the Chateau Theater is a key element of that image, and we'll integrate the reuse and redevelopment of the Chateau Theater as part of the overall plan. We talked earlier in the plan development about not focusing just on subways and skyways, but keeping warm spaces at street level, and there's plenty of precedents both in the U.S. and in Europe where there's street arcades that take you out of the inclement weather, provide activity at the street level, but at the same time give a place for people to warm up so we can, again, really enhance the vitality of the street and also integrate better with the transit that we build. This is a view of the portal. This is that empty parking lot that's just across from the Plumber building. So we see a great opportunity here to use the beautiful, inspiring architecture of the Plumber building and make that the focal point of the portal space. And you see how we've created a beautiful curve on 2nd Street to act as the forecourt to Discovery Square, as well as a welcoming arrival to the Mayo Clinic. So the next key place that we have focused on is Discovery Square. As you all know, this is really one of the key economic generators within the heart of the city. And again, following along 2nd Avenue, this is the street you're seeing in the slide here, connects directly to the Plumber building and also will eventually connect to our ice pavilion. And you see today it's a parking lot and it is sort of ripe for redevelopment and becoming the new address for science and technology within the city. So this is the overhead view of what we think Discovery Square could look like. It's impressive, it's dynamic, the architecture is really inspiring. It's meant to attract those best and brightest scientists and researchers and doctors to want to be there, to feel the energy that Mayo Clinic has, but given an expressive way of showing that through a great new place called Discovery Square that will not only serve as the address for new businesses coming to the city, but it'll also be an authentic urban place for people to just go to and enjoy sitting on a park bench or enjoying a lunch, but part of a reflection of the lifestyle and the urban life that we're trying to create within the heart of the city. The translational cloud was that glass atrium feature that you see in the overhead view. And again, this is a place where researchers and doctors, scientists can come together, have a place to collaborate, have a place to meet, also reflect the science and technology of their craft and how we see that as being an important part of the future of Rochester. And you see this drawing was really purposefully meant to combine the new and the old, the beautiful view of the Plumber building, but also the more forward-thinking architecture of Discovery Square. We also want to leverage the investment that's already been made with the Bio Business Center that's fronting on 1st Avenue. Right now, it's actually its back is to Discovery Square, and we think we can add to the development, which has always been planned for, but use that added development to focus development at the Portal and Discovery Square, again, to create this lively type of urban space that we see across the world. And the precedent that we've been using is Union Square in San Francisco. That's kind of the character and activity and life that we hope we can create in Discovery Square. And this is the overhead view. So you see how we will have an address for buildings all around the square. We will have access with cars and pedestrians, proximate access to the new transit lines, so it's very convenient to all places within the downtown. Each building will have a major address directly on that square, so it'll become really the address for science and technology, not just in Rochester, but across the world. And so we see a great way to bring it all together in this wonderful new public space for downtown. This is a view of the ground level view of Discovery Square. And again, we have the inspiring architecture, the framing of the past and carrying forward that aspiration of the Plummer Building, but also reflecting this next generation of the high school students and the college students that will be the new residents that will live in the DMC and really inhabit Rochester for the future generations. And these are the people that we want to attract. The next area is the downtown waterfront, just east of Peace Plaza and just east of Discovery Square, and we've dubbed the neighborhood the Gardens because we want to sort of build off the natural qualities of this area and create a really healthy, natural neighborhood that's sort of a one-of-a-kind throughout the world, also unique for Rochester to create that downtown population that really reflects healthy living and a tie to nature. We want to leverage the Zumbro River and its natural qualities and really connect the downtown to the waterfront. So many people have talked about how they want to have an authentic downtown waterfront, how the river is, the water level is too low and you can't see the water and it just feels cut off. And we aim to really repair that and integrate the riverfront in our master plan. And this is an overhead view now of what the downtown waterfront might look like. This is looking to the northeast. You see at the top of the screen the Civic Center with its addition. So right out here in the plaza, the new addition is going to fill up the oval space and actually make the Civic Center feel closer to the downtown. We're planning to have development that then surrounds what we're calling Waterfront Square, and it's the area just where the library is located, where we can create a new town square within the heart of the city that connects to the river. We'll create water elements that can be used as skating in the wintertime and visual amenities in the summertime. Will also be part of the whole sustainability plan for the gardens, but also for the whole downtown area. We're planning a farmers market, as was talked about in Seattle, and other amenities to really for the first time connect Rochester to its waterfront and give it a place that people will want to be at and visitors will want to see, and then also leveraging the investment of the Civic Center with all of the visitors that will come to Rochester. They'll have that right at the doorstep as they come into town. The intersection today is wide open. You don't see the water unless you go right up to the edge. It's a lot of pavement, and so we see an opportunity to really totally transform that to make it a real town square for arts and culture, a place for everyone. This is a place where all people can come to, all residents, all visitors, a place that really belongs to the total population of Rochester and really be a unique town square for the downtown. We'll also focus on making sure that the programming of this space applies for all seasons, and we're currently building a similar development in Buffalo, New York. It's actually just completing right now, where we've created water elements that become ice in the wintertime, and we have activity within the city all season long. This is the overhead plan view of all of these elements, and you see how we've taken 2nd Street and recast it with a gentle curve that sort of mirrors the curve of the Zumbro River. You know, there's that curve that at the intersection of 2nd Street that is arguably sort of that point where the river and the city come together, and we're trying to give it life now and bring water upland, but it's water that's not part of the river flow, so we don't get into the flooding issues, but we make water visible now. So if you look at this plan, 2nd Street looking east on Second Street, when you look down Second Street, you'll see water. And so we'll provide that connection to the waterfront. Coming along the north, along the rail line, that'll be repurposed as an open space. That'll be the cultural crescent. We'll have a lot of great cultural and open space amenities. The trail loop will run through there. And then we hope to have other mixed-use development and residential development all surrounding Waterfront Square and really make it a great waterfront town center within the heart of the city. We want to have a farmer's market and not just vegetable stands. We want those as well. And currently, the farmer's market today, we want to incorporate that into a larger market that actually has dining and other venues within the market itself to become, again, a real attraction for both residents and visitors alike. You need facilities like this to really establish a neighborhood. You know, anything that deals with food and groceries is really the first thing that you need to really establish a downtown livability. And so we see the Zumbro Market being something that's tied to the river but also fosters downtown living. This is an overhead view looking to the southeast. You see the Zumbro Market on the right-hand side of the screen, directly adjacent to the rail spur, and then we also have a curved skyway that will be repurposed and embrace the river. You see the beautiful curve of 2nd Street and how it reflects the bend in the Zumbro River, and then the water feature that leads into the cultural crescent. And it all sort of brings it together in a beautiful new town square for the downtown. Again, this is right at the doorstep to the Civic Center, so all those visitors that come to Rochester will see this as a nice welcoming feature within the heart of the city. We also will incorporate historic 3rd Street. It's right there at the waterfront, so we want to make sure that in the waterfront as well as all parts of the downtown, we incorporate historic fabric. It's one of the true gems within the heart of the city, and so this is very close to the waterfront, and we'll make a strong connection to it. Again, from a livability standpoint, we're going to have a whole host of residential development types, low-rise, mid-rise, high-rise, hitting all different price points so we can get the widest range of the population and people to come within the downtown, not just the best and brightest, but also honored citizens as well will want to live in the downtown. So we appeal to a wide variety, so it becomes an authentic downtown neighborhood. And the landscapes will also be very sustainable, collecting rainwater, part of the whole new sort of streetscape look for downtown. We've also put forth a sustainability framework, I think most notably reflected in the Gardens District, but it'll be part of the entire DMC plan where we cover all of the categories that make up a livable city. And you'll see as we go forward in the plan how sustainability is a key theme and a key framework for our master plan. So this is the overhead view looking west on 2nd Street. You see the waterfront square right at the heart of the city, new developments surrounding that area. We have restaurants and the Zumbro Market and other features that will appeal to residents and visitors alike. And of course, we will design it so that it reflects the wintertime, so that water can become an ice sheet and be a place of gathering in the wintertime and be something that really brings a lot of life to an area that kind of quiets down in the wintertime. So it really, 365 days of the year will become really a new town square, waterfront town square for downtown Rochester. The next place is Central Station. We talked about transit being a key component of the overall plan, and I think with Central Station we saw an opportunity with Central Park, an amenity that's sort of hidden in plain sight, and then there's also empty land right up against the railroad tracks, and so we saw an opportunity to redevelop Central Park. There's a plan that's out there right now to refurbish and redevelop the park. So we want to make sure that we take advantage of that investment and make it something that contributes to a wider neighborhood. So we envision the park being redeveloped it improved, and then having development that fronts that park and takes advantage of that address, as well as a parking resource that's right up against the train tracks where we do have empty land. But that empty land is only just 2 or 3 blocks away from Methodist Hospital and the Gonda Building and other main employment centers. So even though this will connect by transit and by the city loop, it'll also be something that you can walk to very conveniently within the heart of the downtown. So we saw it as something that was hidden in plain sight, as an opportunity to deal with parking. All the cars would come in from Civic Center Drive and not clog the streets, but go directly into the parking garages, and then people will make their way either by transit or on foot into the heart of the city. This is an overhead view of how that might evolve. You see Central Park now getting really much more utilization of that park amenity that's sort of a little bit of a forgotten place right now, and now becomes something that welcomes people into the downtown. It's connected to the Crescent. You see that curved line, which will be the sort of the central space within the new Waterfront Gardens neighborhood. And then you see the parking right up against the train tracks, and how conveniently located that is to the heart of the city, and so you can get to the major employment areas either by foot or by transit or by city loop. So we're providing the most amount of options for transit within the downtown. The last area, not in any particular order, is St. Mary's Place. We talked at the beginning of our studies of how to create that positive first impression when people arrive into the city, and I think all of the places that we've created that you've seen thus far are really about creating that very positive impression of downtown Rochester and of its citizens. So St. Mary's Place we see as an opportunity to do that as well. We've mentioned many times how you come off the highway and you see a very unremarkable view of downtown Rochester, and we see something that's much more about the neighborhoods of Rochester, the scale of life in Rochester, the ability for us to have a healthcare facility as a major anchor within an authentic downtown environment where you have great urban places. And then the strategic location of St. Mary's Place is done in a way so that we can leverage St. Mary's Park. St. Mary's Park is this beautiful oasis up on the hill. Actually, I think I have a slide that talks about that. Not unlike Water Tower Place in Chicago on Michigan Avenue, where you have a place that really sort of makes it feel much more pedestrian, a long street that really has a great identity, all marked by that great place. This is a view looking across 2nd Street up at St. Mary's Park. So it's up there. It's this wonderful amenity. I was up there the other day, and when you get to the edge of that bluff, you get a beautiful panorama of the downtown. You see St. Francis on the hill in the distance, but it's cut off from 2nd Street. So we see an opportunity to really take advantage of that hidden asset and make this beautiful passage to St. Mary's Park. We will have elevators to provide ADA access to all portions of this plan, but the scale of St. Mary's Place will be very much about an authentic Rochester neighborhood where the real lifestyle of Rochester comes forward. We have a new address for St. Mary's so that it feels more connected to the downtown. It's at the eastern edge of the St. Mary's campus. So we've sort of taken the front door of St. Mary's and moved it much further east so that it feels more integrated with the rest of the downtown area and creates, again, this welcoming arrival for people as they come off the highway, as they make their way down 2nd Street. You have this beautiful town square that reflects the sort of scale and character and the hospitality of Rochester. This is just another overhead view of how that might work. Centerpiece of that space will be a streetcar stop. So the transit has been totally integrated into all of these places, not only to provide access, but really to sort of celebrate the transit facility within the downtown and make it something that's a positive choice for people to take and be connected to the rest of the city. So those are an overview of all the great places that we've created for downtown Rochester. We've specifically and purposely not focused on projects or individual buildings. I mean, lots of times when cities are trying to redevelop their downtowns, they think about a single building or a single project that might turn the tide for them. We understand that, but we think about how to use those buildings to create a great address, to create welcoming public spaces that are inviting to all citizens, visitors and residents alike, and really create a distribution of these spaces so that it totally integrates the existing downtown and really leverage and build off what is already part of Rochester. So we believe we've created something that's world-class. It's sort of out of the charts in terms of the aspiration, but at the same time, it's all grounded in the fabric and structure and character of Rochester, and so that's been our aspiration. So I think that's our last slide, and I think we open up to questions.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it. So given the discussion we had on best practices earlier and now this presentation, I'm hoping what we can do is just open it up for comment. I saw many of you taking notes. So just opening comments and thoughts.
Well, I have a question. First of all, it's very helpful to see it all laid out like this, so thank you very much. It's just very interesting. My question is, how do you assess, I don't know if I can answer this question very well, ask this question. How do you assess whether we have the scale to accomplish what you're laying out here? The scale I'm meaning in terms of, like, do we have, I mean, partly people, do we have enough customers for all of this? And then, of course, it's also just sort of understanding the, how you pay for, like, do you have enough money for it all?
I'm going to let Bill take this, but I will say that one of the things that actually has been very unusual about this planning process is from day one, we focused on the economic model and the market research that really gives the foundation for the plan. But Bill can really speak more about
So Bill, if you wouldn't mind just reminding everybody what your role was so that
Okay, our role is to work on the economics of the plan, and we actually had one of the first tasks, which was to look at the market and come up with a development program that we felt the market potentially could support over the 20-year period of the plan. This may have components of the plan that would be absorbed beyond the 20 years, and that's fine. Because cities aren't built in just 2 decades. But the core component of it, the development program, is reflected in the plan. There's some elements that are maybe aspirational, and the market will determine if they come to fruition and the timing, but the idea is there. And then also there are components of the plan that are driven by Mayo's planned expansion and growth, so that's tied to a specific actor, and so it's not responding to unknown market forces. The Discovery Square and the biotech biomed, that one is not a market-driven analysis like you see in analyzing office or retail or residential. That is a platform for the city's and state's economic development. So it's providing the capacity and the place to compete with others like places around the country that are competing for the same types of ideas and industries. And the leverage you have here that others would love to have is Mayo Clinic and all of its reputation and investment and research and development. What you don't have compared to some of the other places, as the best practices example showed, is the place yet, the idea where that can happen. But this plan provides that. So we hope the combination will build the market. But one will respond to some market that is already anticipated, but also will build new markets that you currently don't have. Yeah.
Thank you. First of all, I think that this proposed plan does incorporate the direction that we've heard from our boards, from the community, from the state. Think beautiful, think bold, think big, make this attractive for people to live, work here, want to come here. So I like all that. One of the things I love about Rochester is the community, the charm that's here. We have locally owned businesses, we have locally owned restaurants, et cetera. That's appealing. And our visitors and guests, as well as those of us who live here, like that. How do we know that the beautiful space can have an economic model that makes that work here? Are you with me? How and where do we assure that we create a plan that respects and potentiates that local charm?
We've had that discussion a lot, Dr. Simmons, around the table. I'm going to ask Amy Supple to make a comment on that. And Bill may want to comment as well, because it's so important, and all the cities that we saw had a combination of old and new to create a destination city. So Amy?
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Simmons, for asking that question. We have really talked a lot about this, because part of what makes a city authentic and part of what makes a city, or gives a city character, is its local businesses and business districts. And so as part of this strategy, what we will have to do as part of the business strategy is really think about how to attract and keep local business downtown. Cities struggle with this a lot, and from a marketing perspective, you know, I've actually personally worked on projects where we've had to put those kind of strategies together, where you look at the economics, the rent levels, things like that, and you think about the percentage of downtown businesses that you want to have local. You think about really attracting good regional players that can you know, support maybe a little bit bigger strategies. But you have to make it part of the business strategy, part of the economic strategy, and part of the master plan strategy. Those things all have to play together. And I don't know, Bill, if you have anything that you want to add to it.
Yeah, I think you know, downtown commercial development strategies is finding, maybe 20, 30 years ago, the movement was trying to create a new type of regional shopping center downtown in a more urban environment, but still had many of the same stores that you have in a suburban regional shopping center. It's since evolved through experience, some positive, some, you know, hard lessons learned, that consumers, when they come to downtown, they're looking for something different than what they can get in the regional shopping centers. They want authenticity, they want, and especially visitors. You know, they can go to a chain anywhere in the country. When they come to a place, they want to see something that is authentic and reflects the place. So you want to have a blend of that. And you know, ultimately rents only rise if, and are sustained only if the sales are there to support it. But there are different techniques people use that would be you could consider as part of the business plan. One is to plan and accommodate more space than metrics would tell you the market could support. That was actually a strategy with the gas lamp in downtown San Diego. Much more space than at the time people thought the market could support. What that allowed was some lower rent spaces, and young local companies getting started and getting established in those lower rent spaces. Other places have worked with their commercial brokerage community, property owners and developers, to develop a leasing plan and strategy for their downtown commercial district, and kind of a commitment of having some percentage of the space devoted to locally owned or regionally owned companies. Some places have limited national chains that can occur in a commercial district, either directly through ordinance or indirectly by having maximum commercial tenant space requirements that wouldn't then fit the national chain models. Others maybe allow it, but require some impact analysis and discretionary decision making before chains are allowed. And then others have a training and perhaps small business loan program to help the small businesses. So it's just not putting the space out there, but proactively trying to build and incubate that kind of company with local folks. And then finally, another model would be, and I think the market, for example, might be an example of that when you look at public markets elsewhere, is a co-op that owns the property and the real estate, and they have another mission besides just return on investment on the real estate, and so they set up their business model accordingly.
Oh, thank you. I want to respond because I think the word I was that I heard that was probably I was searching for is that authenticity piece. Because I think this is a success if Rochester is Rochester. Because I know what I like about Portland and what about Seattle. And I want to like what I like now about Rochester. And maybe people in the city government and maybe others in the DMCC board, people understand all these tools, but they're critical. And we can't just consider space without considering the policies and the actions it's going to take to make that space work in the way we want it to. I like market, but you can't just leave this open to free market and maintain the authenticity.
Microphone, Dr. Simmons, just for a minute. This plan will get adopted probably fairly soon, but I negotiate deals. I've done a lot of that. So let's put myself in the position where I want to attract some of this plan being implemented. And I want to know from your experience how that's done. We have some dollars for public infrastructure that need to be spent to attract, I'll say leverage, the private development. So it's kind of a chicken and egg problem. Right. If we have demand for downtown residents and the rents support them, as Bill said, that's a starting place. But is it common for the person on the public side to hold back the approval for this kind of development unless the developer participates and assists in the public infrastructure? So we keep our dollars, they're available, but you have to use some of your private development dollars to help build this piece of the infrastructure, whatever it is. And if you do that, then you get a permit to build whatever building it is. Is that, am I on the right track, or is it different than that?
Yeah, and Bill can comment as well, but there's, across the country and in the world, there's really a mix. Sometimes, the public invests in creating those addresses and those amenities themselves to attract, and sometimes it's part of the development deal, and it really just depends upon the market. In this plan, there's a whole host of things that are more public and things that are really more of a blend that are going to require the public sector to do their share. And I think as we get into the detailing of those early action projects, we need to parse just how much the city can invest that makes sense, and at the same time, what can we get from the private sector?
The reason I ask that is I've seen examples of where the public has spent a lot of money thinking, we fall in love with our plan and with our city. Of course they want to live here. Well, maybe not. So they invest a lot of money in this infrastructure to attract commercial development, housing development that never happens. And so that money is basically wasted. And I want to do that. Right. I'd like to see the two simultaneously come together to create what we're trying to do.
Bill, that's the market.
Yeah, I mean, we call some of these techniques value capture techniques.
I didn't know that word.
Yeah, because you're creating value with the plan and the vision, right, but then more directly the public investment that creates value, and then having a supportive entitlement process too that really makes it an incentive for a developer to implement the plan rather than to try to fight a plan with their own ideas. When they're successful, there's a point where you don't need to subsidize private development. Right. The market's there. In fact, they're coming to you and wanting to, and in order to get their entitlement, may provide more in order to get that entitlement, or to get a density bonus, let's say, or some type of, build the pocket park in order to get additional density. Portland does that, or Portland required some companion investment with the transit system they were planning. Vancouver is famous for this, but so is Arlington, Virginia. And so, and in San Diego it was, where for the last 25, 30 years, they have not subsidized any private development other than affordable housing. And so, but the challenge is those early years, where you're trying to demonstrate to the real estate investment market, the lenders market, and the equity markets that there's a market support for this type of development. And in those early years is where you might see some underwriting of land, for example, make a project work, or like in Portland's case, when we learned one of the big drivers of cost in urban infill development is parking. And investors, national investors, often want more parking than even the regulations require. If the regulations are low, that's our problem right now in San Diego. But in Portland, they're able to attract investment with zero parking. But in their early years, they had to help some projects demonstrate that they could work financially and economically without the same kind of parking ratio they would have in the suburbs. Once they had some comps established, then it was a lot easier for them to reduce their parking ratios or eliminate them and still attract investment capital to make it happen.
Now, I'm not talking about subsidizing the developer. I don't believe in a lot of development, subsidies for development. I just think it's a slippery slope, and once you do one, how do you turn down the next one and the next one, and pretty soon you're in business. No, I'm talking about partnerships. Yeah. And if we were in negotiation, assuming that there's a demand for the development, whatever kind it is, we will participate at a level, but we're not going to do that unless you commit to what you want. There's a lot of public infrastructure here that needs to make this plan work, many millions of dollars. And so my question was, how do you get started with that? Not necessarily subsidizing the developer, but partnering with the developer to encourage the developer to build what the market seems to think can support, the market can support, and then we invest in that, but as partners, not as subsidizers.
It's important to have some policies to drive your decision-making regarding the expenditure of public funds, you know, so that it's tied to certain outcomes that are expected. So of yourselves, but also the developer. Right. And then performance zoning or density bonuses in exchange for public investment tied to public amenities is another tool that's often used. Sometimes implemented through your entitlement regulations. More often you see them implemented through a type of development agreement, so it is negotiated. But there is a negotiation. If you want these extra value to your land, we expect some of that to come back, combined with our money, to make and implement these public amenities.
Sri, I think you had a question as well.
Yeah, I just have, actually have two comments. First, I want to say that I love the plan, and I think it would be wonderful if it could be done tomorrow, but you know, I think we would all love to see that. But I think the two questions I have are one is, given the sort of the issues that Jerry raised, how would we prioritize these districts? Do you have some sense of how those might be prioritized in terms, as we sort of seek to create the space? That's one question. And the other one is, you know, I love the idea of local businesses that Patty brought up. I think that's all great, but local businesses will thrive when we're able to create high-priced jobs in the city, that, you know, high-value jobs, because that's the demand. Those are the people who are going to, you know, support the local businesses. And I think that has to be our long-term vision. It's not creating local businesses, it's where are the people who are the high-income jobs? How is the competitiveness of Rochester going to be bolstered by our plan, by which the high-value jobs are created, which then creates the demand for all the great local businesses and the authentic businesses in town. So I still haven't quite seen the plan go through to that endpoint, because, you know, I don't think there's much, and who are we competing with? You know, are we competing with Duluth? Are we competing with Eden Prairie? I have no idea, you know. Who's the, you know, what are the folks that we are competing with? And we talk about Portland and so on, of course, but even in our more immediate neighborhood. And everything I've seen about, you know, improving the competitiveness of a region has to do with reaching out and embracing the strengths of the region, about collaborating across, not just within the town. It's not just within the four walls that you create competitiveness. You create competitiveness by embracing the region, and I still haven't quite seen how that's going to happen in this plan. So 2 comments, and I don't know if anyone has something to
Tree,
say.
I think I'm going to ask Amy to comment on the priorities, because we've had quite a bit of discussion on that, and we can talk a little bit about your next part about attracting talent.
Okay.
And the regionalism, Gary, you might want to comment on that as well, because Gary's doing some great work on that front too.
From the standpoint of how the project comes together and the priorities of the project, we actually will be discussing that in detail in a later section today.
Okay.
So, and you will, you'll see not only how the DMC funding works, but also how city, state, other public funding may come into the project, as well as private development dollars, to respond to Mr. Bell's question.
I would comment, I think to your point, you know, a lot of this demand is going to be driven by new dollars that flow into the economy. And how do the new dollars flow into the economy? It has to happen because there are the businesses that are here that are selling their goods or services, their customer base is outside of this region. And they're growing, expanding, bringing more money in, or we're locating new businesses in here, that's where their market is. That creates the demand then for a lot of what we see here. Mayo continues to grow and prosper, hires more people. There'll be more demand for hotel rooms, be more demand for restaurants, whether local or otherwise. And so what we're working that's complementary to this is we have a 5-year economic growth plan. We're focused on growing and diversify the economy. We're talking about building the base. So what I'm most interested about this plan is the Discovery Square piece of this, because that's what's going to create the demand to fill a lot of this out. I think there's probably some low-hanging fruit there as we collectively work, DMC, Ready, the city, the state, and DEED, and everybody. We're working on a project right now. If we can pull this off, it's going to create that kind of momentum in the regenerative medicine space that can lead to another one. You know, one of the things I didn't share my reflections, but one thing I noticed when I went to Cleveland to the medical mart, I don't know what anybody else thought about it. I know we shared a comment together when we were standing there, but how we noticed that, yeah, GE was there, Cardinal Health, and you name the brand, it was there in the medical mart. It was a nice storefront with a display in it, but there were no people there. So isn't destination medical community or center city, to me, would be, we have to take that to a whole different level. It's about the best of the best, these companies and Mayo collaborating together to figure out how they're going to add value and create more value in the healthcare sector, drive cost out of the system. We can be the place where these kind of partnerships and collaborations take place, attracting these other names together to work on these big systematic problems, because I think we're going to see later here, we're probably going to see the economic stuff, and we all know that the economy, everything's based on the way the world kind of was, and we all know the healthcare economy is going to be changing. So all this has to take place in a healthcare economy that's structurally going to be changing over the next 20 years. This is long-winded, I know that, but the point is, your point is well taken. The real demand is going to be created by growth of what we call the traded sectors. The traded sectors, that the goods and services that are being sold, for the most part, outside of the area, outside of the state, maybe someplace else in the world. That brings money in, creates demand. We have more people coming in. We know we have people waiting in the wings right now who want to develop, so there's some demand right there that will be covered. But the real growth over time is going to be growing the base of the economy. A lot of this economic development we're seeing is community development as opposed to economic development. We got to distinguish between the two, but they do work together too.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks. Other questions? Anybody else have any notes they jotted down? We're going to move into the transportation section right now, but I don't want to move on until we've had our questions or comments covered. Anybody? Ed?
I have a couple. One of the things that I saw in that video, or that I really liked, was the planning model. I wish we had had one, because there's paper and pictures and views and images all over, but I guess maybe I'm a hands-on person, but to see a layout of what we're doing and how we could how that's going to affect the area with traffic flow and with buildings and so on I think would be helpful. I don't know if it's too late for that, but I saw that in the picture. I thought, boy, it'd be nice to have sitting here in front of us with some of these visions that we have. But I really like the Discovery Square Light Pavilion. I think those are some really neat deals. On Broadway, I noticed here with the visitor lantern, is there still through traffic on all four lanes?
Yes.
With that? Okay, I couldn't tell with the drawing here. And then one of the things that I'm hearing a lot, and I imagine we all kind of are, is affected buildings, affected property owners, affected people that are looking at this going, hey, what's going on? It's going right through my building, or my building's not there anymore. How are we going to communicate and working on communicating that to people that, this is critically important to them, and yet they're kind of hearing of it through this process. So
I can answer that, Ed. We have been communicating, actually, with quite a few people. When something in the plan first, I want to just make a comment that these are concepts. So they won't land exactly in the block or the particular, they might, but oftentimes these things shift and change right after the first project starts. Then the plan starts to shift and evolve. And somebody earlier was talking about the flexibility and the power of creating a flexible plan, and that's what we've created here. But we have talked to building owners and property owners and tried to get input from them about the plan itself and the excitement, or if people had comments or concerns, we've taken all of those into consideration as well. And if it affects their particular building, we've talked a lot about that. So again, the front end of my comment was most important, that these are concepts. These are something that we aspire to, and they will look different and they will change, I'm quite sure.
Well, I just want to, I've seen some of Peter's work, and I think there's a lot here to like. There's a few things maybe that people aren't going to like, but I think I appreciate your vision and your work on this. It's got some exciting things here.
Thanks, Ed. Other comments? Okay, let's move on to the transportation. We talked a lot about transportation this morning earlier. People have commented quite a bit about transportation, particularly from our best practices. And Tom is going to visit with us for a very short time on transportation. Did you see that?
Just
The
3
short,
hours,
I'm
right,
doing the
Lisa?
short thing.
Good afternoon, everyone. Very excited to be here to talk about really what I see as a key supporting element of achieving what Peter just talked about, the great vision for business growth and land use, and really creating a wonderful, livable community in the downtown. Transportation helps us get there. It's part of how we accomplish that. We've got an unprecedented challenge in terms of access. We're talking about doubling, tripling the number of visitors to your community, which is a great thing. We're talking about huge growth in the number of people working here. Rochester is a community where you already have 45,000 people a day coming from outside your community to work. That's amazing for a city of 110,000 people. One thing we did is take a look at some other cities around the country, many quite a bit larger, and looked at the number of jobs in their central business districts compared to the working age population. And you can see that Rochester today is very off-kilter in terms of that relationship. And as you look out growing 30,000 jobs into the future, if we accomplish what we're trying to accomplish with the DMC, we're even more off-kilter. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. In some ways, it's a great thing for transportation because it's easy to get people to a dense central location. But it really shows that we have a very, very unique challenge as well as a very unique set of opportunities here in Rochester. The other thing I want to recognize as we talk about growing the workforce by 30,000, 35,000 employees over 20 years is we're not talking about the peers of those of us sitting around the table. We checked with Mayo HR. Their average hiring age is 31 years of age. So we think over the next 20 years, we're talking about people that are maybe in their first job, that are in college, some that are in high school, some are probably in junior high, maybe a couple that are still in elementary school when we talk about those 30,000 people. So what do we know about the younger generation? Well, we know the 18 to 30-year-olds are doing things way differently than we did. They have much less infatuation with the car. They're riding transit more. They're interested in having a broad range of transportation options. partly because they're obsessed with their smartphones and driving's just a distraction, but that's the reality. It's a very, very different generation. It's by far the most significant generational change in how we move and live that we've seen in our lifetimes. Another thing we know is that you guys do pretty well today in terms of getting people into downtown outside the single occupant automobile. Just about 70%, maybe even less than that now, are driving alone to the DMC district on a day-to-day basis. What we do know, though, if we try to accommodate all this growth with that same mode split, we're going to be in big trouble. And that trouble looks like about $2 billion in parking investment and enough surface parking space to basically cover the entirety of downtown. Or we calculated grow the Graham ramp to 101 stories. Obviously, we're not going to do either one of those things. And we've heard a lot about not creating a place like this that's dominated by single-use ramps, parking ramps, but creating a place like this that's really a people-focused place. Not to say this model doesn't need parking. We'll grow parking here, we'll build parking, but we want to do it in a constrained manner, and we want to do it differently than we've done it in the past. So we've modeled parking, and we've modeled that parking use a shared parking model, so we can make better use of the stalls that we do invest in, because we know parking is going to get more expensive. If we do it right, it increases the cost. So this is still a lot of parking development, as many as 16,000 stalls within the DMC district in the periphery of the downtown. That's still a heck of a lot of parking. So one of the things we're trying to do is make sure we have decision processes put in place so we build parking at the right time, and we exercise other tools, transit and transportation demand management, to get people into the downtown and the DMC area first before we make that expensive investment. One of the planning principles we've used is we're essentially not going to grow roadway space into the downtown, and what that creates is kind of a ring of constraint. And what we know is we can't bring all those 35 people in using the same mode split. So that's really driven how we've planned for parking and how we've planned for transit. You know, transit's not a nice idea. It's a economic imperative, really, if we want to accomplish this plan. And so what we've looked at is what type of mode share targets do we need to move towards from those numbers we just sent you earlier. And we believe, based on our analysis, that we'll need to hit about a 50% mode share by non-drive alone trips. So we think carpool can grow. You've got a good market for carpooling. We think biking and walking can grow a bit here. We mostly think transit can really do the heavy lifting, since you've got a lot of people coming from long distances. You've already got a good transit culture here, as well as in the state of Minnesota has a great transit culture. So we want to hit at least 23% transit mode share, but we've got aggressive goals to do even better than that if we can. If we do better than that, we build less parking, we spend less on parking, and we spend more on creating the great places that Peter talked about. One of the things I also wanted to make clear is when we talk about mode share targets, we're really talking about people that are coming at the peak of the peak when things are most congested, commuters. We're not talking about a lot of the people that we want to get to downtown. So we're not talking about patients. We're assuming patients will continue to drive and park close to where they're going. We're not talking about visitors or hotel guests. Generally, they can take transit if they want to, but we don't expect them to. We're not talking about retail customers who are coming downtown to spend money. And we're still not talking about 50% of the commuters who will still likely drive alone. Who we are talking about is generally, people who are traveling at the peaks, who are day-to-day commuters who can change their behaviors fairly easily, and potentially people who are looking for cheaper options as parking costs increase downtown. So how are we going to accomplish that? Transit, again, is one of the key tools to bring people into downtown, but then also to help them just park once they get here. So I wanted to just be clear what we're talking about when we talk about transit. You've got Rochester City Lines, express bus type service. We expect that to grow. The local bus system here is very productive. We expect that to increase. We think we can do more remote park and ride service at the outskirts of downtown to get people downtown efficiently and cheaply. But transit is also what keeps traffic moving. So we've got people saying to us, why do I care about transit? I'm going to drive anyways. Well, if you're going to drive anyways, transit's great for you. Unless you like sitting through 3 or 4 or 5 signal cycles, transit works great for you. Transit allows that taxable development that you're seeing in Peter's plan to happen rather than costly parking. And it also helps to create those great pedestrian places because transit customers are first and foremost pedestrians and provides an opportunity to create that great street life. So as we look at this transportation challenge, we know it's a regional one. You've got people coming from 70 plus miles to get here from the cities, from neighboring states. So what we want to do is get people on buses further out in those communities where we can. We want to capture them at park and rides for people who don't have a bus from their community and want to park at the periphery. And we want to capture some of them at the outskirts of downtown and help them park once and have a great transit experience downtown. So as we've evaluated this, we expect somewhere in the range of 20, maybe 28,000 new transit customers coming to downtown every day. Again, if you're a driver, that's a lot of cars off the road. 100 plus new commuter coaches coming to town every day. And to the earlier comment about regionalism, we think the potential for a link between the Twin Cities in here is great, and building on the model that we've seen in San Francisco and how they interact with the Silicon Valley, Seattle and how they interact with Microsoft, and Redmond, Boulder and how they interact with Denver, all with great bus-based transportation systems that make those economies and linkages closer and valuable. Again, we're talking about putting park and ride where people are coming to town. We really want to build a very high quality system from the key entry points to downtown that would connect through downtown at key stations. Looking at creating not just park and rides, but really neighborhood mobility centers that people aren't just driving to, but are biking and walking to. With higher end vehicles, there's investment in plan to upgrade the fleet for those types of services. And then once people get to downtown or park at the periphery of downtown, we want to build a circulator system, with the first phase being the pink connection, the east-west connection along 2nd Street. We're looking at a mode here that's growing around the world, booming in Europe and the US. It's modern, clean, electric transit, and it's transit that integrates with the street. Some of the comments we heard on the trips in Portland and Seattle where people valued streetcar because of the experience it created in relation to the street. There's big windows. You feel like you're part of the street environment. It creates that intimacy. It's very easily accessible for people in wheelchairs or mobility devices, and it's also very stable. You can read on a train where you can't read on a bus. Tucson just opened a streetcar this year, and one of the things they've reported along the line is that this summer, compared to last, a lot of retail businesses are seeing double the activity, double the amount of people out in the street coming to their businesses. We've had a lot of questions about, can we really build a streetcar in Rochester? Come on. And we can. And one of the things that I think proves it quite simply is if you take a look at the amount of ridership that Mayo's providing on their shuttle system between St. Mary's and the downtown campus today, there's more riders than Seattle's South Lake Union streetcar carries in a day on those buses just on 2nd Avenue. That doesn't include any other transit on 2nd Avenue. Doesn't include any other markets. You've already got more riders in that corridor today than that major urban system carries. We think that there's ridership potential for as many as 10,000 trips per day on that system. And again, in comparison to a lot of systems around the country, that's really good ridership and puts the project in a really good place to get some federal funding to help build that. There's a lot of planning that'll still need to be done on that project. So this isn't the exact design or the exact answer. But we do think it's worth looking at dedicated right-of-way so that becomes a very fast trip, literally, so you can get from St. Mary's to downtown in 4 to 5 minutes reliably. We think there's an opportunity to build that in the center of 2nd Street as a dual mode system that also can benefit buses. So you really have a thoroughfare that's pumping people into and out of downtown at the peak of the peak. And we've been looking at operating concepts because starting a new system is expensive on a year-to-year basis. The capital money is easy, the operating money is difficult. Where we can overlay this park and ride system with the streetcar system and create a really powerful transportation tool in the downtown and save ourselves some operating costs, substantial operating costs in the interim. And we see opportunities in other cities to integrate the branding of those services so it becomes one seamless system. So again, people have asked the question, well, you looked at other modes, you looked at elevated transit, that's very fast. You looked at bus-based systems. Why'd you pick streetcar? And really, a number of reasons. One, because of this intimacy, this relationship to the street and the types of places that we're trying to build. We can't get that with an elevated system. Elevated systems bring issues of exclusivity. Is that just for Mayo? It's issues of separation, visual impacts. Streetcar has a real place-making power. We've seen that in our trips around the country. It's quiet. It's very sustainable, electric operation. And it has the right level of capacity for this area. So as I talked about, next steps would really be to start a federalized funding process. There's federal grants to build these types of projects, and we think this project could be very competitive. The other thing we want to make sure we do on the transit front is as the downtown grows, as congestion increases, that we're providing capacity and effective pathways for transit downtown. One of the things a streetcar project means is we'll probably have to move the bus center off Second to build that great portal space by the Plummer building that Peter talked about. So we have in the plan an opportunity to create new transit pathways, largely on 4th Street and 3rd and 4th Avenues, to make sure we can move people quickly and efficiently into the downtown core and get them eventually to Central Station and the Transit Terrace on transit. So we see opportunity to really remake some of those streets with transit and transit amenities along with streetscape projects as a key part of that, building great heated, smart shelters. So on the street front, again, we're trying to create a new sense of intimacy to support those unique experiences, many of which come from the street and getting people out on the street. So there's a number of projects, a number of streets that the plan looks to invest in. Shown on this map, I'm going to hit on a few. Broadway, the Broadway corridor is one that we think is really an essential project. It's a heavily trafficked street today. We envision that it'll maintain the same number of lanes through downtown, but that the right-of-way will be tightened, the streetscape will be improved, traffic will be slowed, and some key turn movements like at 2nd and 2nd will be eliminated, so it becomes a much more comfortable place to walk along and to cross. And as we look at these types of projects around the country, these streetscape projects, many are returning great dollars on the investment in terms of jobs and new local businesses. Civic Center Drive, particularly in the Gardens and Waterfront District, again, is an opportunity I think we see really to change the character of that place to a much more pedestrian-oriented place. It's a street we think is overbuilt, so we do propose narrowing that street to one lane in each direction. Really widening the sidewalks and making that into a great civic street like these examples in Indianapolis and St. Louis, where we've got wide sidewalks and great pedestrian spaces at an urban scale. 2nd Street's a very important street for transit as well as general transportation. Some of the great places Peter showed you at the heart of the city, the Portal and the downtown waterfront district, really rely on this being a much, much more pedestrian-oriented place than it is today. So again, we see a different cross-section. There's still traffic on that street. There's transit, which is much more predictable for pedestrians, provides easy opportunities to get across that street, and can marry with wonderful streetscape investments, such as Main Street in Houston, where they've built a transit project and really done great things with the street as well to create some really fantastic places, not the kind of places you think about when you think about Houston. And then finally, some streets where we really want to build on the Peace Plaza and some of the great pedestrian environments you've created in downtown. 2nd Avenue to the south, which Peter showed you, and then continuing 1st Street across Broadway to the Civic Center. Looking at examples like Georgia Street in Indianapolis, where they've created this great shared street where auto traffic's still allowed, but it's a very fantastic pedestrian space. Or Stevens Walk in Calgary, or Bell Street, which some of you may have seen on the trip in Seattle. So how is this going to change traffic volumes? Well, we will see traffic go up in the downtown, but relative to the amount of development, if we implement this transit plan, the volume increases are not unmanageable. Some streets like 2nd will actually expect traffic to go down because of some of the changes. Streets like Broadway and Civic Center, actually volumes stay about the same on those streets, so they still continue to be important streets for throughput. There are a few streets like 4th Street where we do see volumes go up quite a bit because we are displacing some traffic from Second. And the final thing I want to talk about is really the part of this vision is creating a fantastic walkable set of downtown districts. And the one investment that we have in the plan that really links those all together and creates this idea of a very walkable place. This is a picture Bill took in Strasburg when he was there recently, which I think just sort of captures the kind of culture and street culture that we would love to have here. Kids on bikes, people playing music, local shops. And the other thing we know is that there's a great market for walkable urbanism today. So if we talk about attracting the best and the brightest, we know that surveys are telling us almost 80% of college grads want to live in walkable urban environments. You know, as we see real estate pricing based on demand, there's a huge premium on people wanting to buy real estate in walkable urban and suburban environments. And as we look at, you know, again, national statistics about where people with a high level of education and where good paying jobs are, there's actually a direct correlation between walkability and education and GDP. So again, there's a real economic incentive to create walkable neighborhoods. One of the ways we plan to do that is through this City Loop facility, which is very much structured on the idea of the Indianapolis Cultural Trail. Many of you saw that fantastic, well-designed facility. This is a loop and a north-south connector that we've planned through the city, really linking the experiences of all the districts. So again, it's kind of the connective tissue to the great districts Peter presented. You know, and I know some of you got to meet with the mayor in Indianapolis, you know, and he's talked about how important this facility really emphasizes it as the most important project that Indianapolis has done in the last 10 years amongst many great projects. And we see a great link to economic development and job creation from that facility. Green screen means I'm done, I think.
That's great. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. Great overview and interesting information. Any comments on the transportation piece? Ed?
I have quite a few questions.
All right.
The city loop that we just saw, kind of the last picture there, showed people biking and walking, so it's like a trail basically, right?
Yeah, it's a multi-use facility with, you know, really high-end both pedestrian and cycling facilities. In some places they may act as, you know, maybe the same shared use facility. To other places it may be a separated facility where there's a place for bikes and a place for pedestrians.
And those are about, what, 8 foot, 10 foot? How wide are they usually?
Yeah, again, if you look at the Indianapolis model, it really varies depending on the street and how it integrates into the urban context. So, you know, in some places it may be 20 plus feet wide with the sidewalk and the bike trail. In some places it's only 8 or 10 feet wide.
And I think one of the things that's been frustrating to me is our Public Works Department looks at us as having pedestrian trail systems and bike lanes. And I think that's a duplication. I really like the bike trails thing. I think the trails, you get people rollerblading, you get them walking their dog, get them out there with their families on bikes, all that kind of stuff. They're safe, they're, you know, separated from traffic. So I hope we continue down that trail. I really like that.
And I think to your point, I mean, this is an urban trail. It's not about people going fast.
Right.
So you can have that mix.
And in most cases, I mean, people want to be able, they like on a nice day to go, you know, jump on their bike and take a trail that gets them into the downtown. And they, you know, but, you know, I've seen a lot of people that are skeptical of these bike lanes for safety reasons. But that's another matter for another day. I'm also kind of concerned about that us kind of going all in on changing the transit and not trying to contain or develop our roadway systems. It seems like we're choking down a lot of the roads and almost forcing people to say, well, you know, you got transit, you got other alternative modes. I think that's a current desired attribute about our city. I think a lot of people like to be able to drive down there, and I know we talk about, you know, the huge need of parking ramps and parking spaces in the future. I was just doing a little research the other day, and Des Moines is one of the cities that have over 30,000 parking spots. They promote the ability to have parking, free parking on weekends after 6. And they were just ranked the best city in America for young professionals, #1 place for cities up and coming downtowns and so on. So, you know, it's not against the rules to have parking in your downtown and roadways to get people to and from. I think it's something that people enjoy, and I hope we don't just completely go away from that. I think it's I think it's a mix, and I hope we continue to go that route as we work on the transportation plan.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and I think, we're not trying to emphasize that we're not going to build parking. In fact, we know parking is a critical part of a successful downtown. And actually, when we look at the ratio of parking that's proposed in the plan, sort of per unit of new development, compared to how much parking you have in the downtown, over 17,000 stalls now, compared to the amount of development that's on the ground, we're actually maintaining a relatively comparable ratio. So it's not like we're really kind of going off the deep end in terms of restricting parking. It's pretty consistent with what you actually see.
Well, I appreciate that,
here
Tom.
today.
There was a board member that left earlier and got his point in. I want to make sure I got mine in, so
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I have no idea who that is, yeah.
I didn't see many pictures of somebody with a parka on when they're out
Yeah,
there.
I was going to say it's cold here.
You always have to remember that. When you put a streetcar in, do you have to tear up the whole road again? We've just done some roads where you're talking about it. Or can they cut the place in there for the rail?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that a lot of cities like about streetcar compared to, light rail, for example, is it's a pretty light intervention. So if you've just done streetscape projects like on Second, which you've done a lot of work and put a lot of money into that, you can actually come in and just tear up about an 8-foot swath, actually without going too deep, which often is a real benefit in terms of hitting utilities and have to do bigger utility reconstruction. And then you just lay rebar and pour right in that trough. So it's not the type of investment where you actually have to be very invasive at the curb or do major street reconstruction, which is also why the costs are substantially lower than other types of rail transit. So one of the things that Portland actually helped to, just getting a little bit in the weeds, but helped to pioneer was a much shallower rail. So it allows them to dig a much shallower trench, which tends to help avoid a lot of utility conflicts. So one of the things modern streetcar use are a more shallower rail base, which really helps with that.
Question. Back to Jerry's point about partnerships, would you envision that you would help pay for a streetcar system, for example, with some sort of a public-private partnership?
That's not an uncommon model. If you look at streetcar capital financing around the country, there's radically different approaches in different cities. Many cities have used local improvement districts along the corridor. Probably not a very terribly viable concept here, given the amount of institutional and government property along the corridor. There is quite a bit of federal money available, and so our planning, we're assuming that this project would go through a federalized process. The FDA Small Starts program, can contribute up to 50% or plus or over of the cost of the capital project. But most of these do have some level of private money invested in the capital. But part of the next phase of process would certainly be to develop that more detailed finance plan.